Hi, welcome to another episode of Open Studio. A couple weeks ago, I posted to my story a question. That question was, do you prefer to shoot color or black and white? And what brought you to that conclusion? Color negative film has undoubtedly been the most popular choice when shooting film these last few years, with Portra 400 being the reigning king. And I was just curious to see, who out there is actually shooting black and white primarily, and why. Way back when I started shooting film, I shot only black and white because it was most affordable for a student like myself, and it was what I learned on, so I was very comfortable with it. I feel like a lot of people over time will grow out of black and white film. They'll think that it's antiquated, or it looks old, or moody, and they'll want to capture life the way they see it, or they'll want to be more vibrant and colorful, and so black and white film doesn't really make sense to them. But I was really interested to see who would see my story and have a good reason or justification for why they decided to shoot black and white in 2023. What was that? I'm out here on this beautiful, overcast, cold, sort of rainy day in Milwaukee by the harbor. I thought this would be kind of a nice place to grab a couple of shots in the subdued light. I am out here shooting a roll of Fuji Acros 2. I wanted to share some of those responses that I got to that question in my story with you guys. But first I figured I'd tell you why I like to still shoot black and white film and why I think black and white film is kind of special. Like I mentioned before, when I first started shooting film, black and white film was all I could afford and what was really available to me as a student. So that's what I stuck with, that's what I learned on, and it kind of became eventually something that I grew out of, because I felt that once I had mastered black and white, or at least figured out how to shoot properly exposed images, color was the evolution of that. You moved on to color, and now you can understand how light works. Now you can figure out how to do color. And that's exactly what I did. I'd stopped shooting black and white, and I don't think I intentionally shot black and white film for 10 years, maybe? That might be an exaggeration, but it was a really long time until I considered shooting black and white for any work or anything that I wanted to do that I was gonna show people. I really loved color, and I wanted to show off my skills shooting color film, and I didn't want to waste my time with what I thought was entry-level film. When I was in school, I learned how to develop black and white film. So whenever I did shoot black and white film, mostly for school, I'd process it at home, or I'd bring it to school and process it at the darkroom there. And then when I had color film, I would just bring it to a lab, because there was a lab very close to where I lived. There were plenty of places I could drop my film off at: CVS, Walgreens, Walmart. So there's no real worry about needing to process film. Except I found myself in a predicament. I'm not exactly sure what this predicament was, but I had a roll of Fuji Superia 400 that I really wanted to process, and I didn't want to wait by sending it to a film lab and having them process it as color film. And I thought to myself, why don't I process this in black and white chemicals and see what happens? That's what I did. And it came out as a roll of black and white film. That kind of reignited this interest and this curiosity as to what is good and interesting about black and white film, and made me want to start shooting it again. So I did. I discovered Fuji Acros, the first version of it, and I really fell in love with it. I liked it because rather than having to go in and tweak it like with HP5, which is what I learned on, you could process it, and the contrast was really beautiful as it was. There wasn't a lot of editing that you needed to do if you exposed it properly, and it was just kind of an easy button for beautiful photographs that had this timeless classic kind of depth to them. Without going too much into my philosophy around film and photography, I will say that black and white film is special to me because you can take everything else away and just focus on the light and just focus on the directionality, fill, shadow, brightness, all of that stuff, and really make your image look exactly how you want it to, just by kind of changing settings on your camera or moving your subject or doing whatever. And that's really fascinating, because that's kind of like the very fundamental part of photography that I found the most interesting when I first started. To me, color can be very daunting at times, especially in times like this where everything is gray. There might be a pop of color here and there, but everything's pretty muted. And things in this environment with a lot of color tend to end up looking pretty ugly, because they're kind of clashing with this gray middle ground of everything, and it doesn't seem very inspiring to me. It doesn't like spark joy, I guess. But with black and white, I can go out and I can take some photos of these boats that are up here in this harbor, and it's kind of telling a story. Like, it's not really confined to the dark moodiness of the fact that it's overcast. There's other things going on. There's light there. There's other stuff going on, and you don't have to focus on like, oh, is this color represented the way I want it to? Well, you don't have to worry about it because you're shooting in black and white. I could go on for a long time about what I like about black and white photography, but I want to get to the responses that a lot of you guys sent to the question that I put in my story. I think there were a lot of really good responses, and I want to share just a few of my favorites. The more astute of you may have noticed that my voice sounds like crap and I sound like I'm sick. I am sick. I am on the tail end of a really crappy cold that my girlfriend gave me. She had it much worse. I'm feeling a little bit better today, but I've been feeling pretty crappy this week. So I'm gonna share a few of my favorites. There were a lot of responses, a lot of really good responses, but I wanna share a few of my favorites. Mr. Anthropology says, you prefer black and white. Love the look and the choices you get in processing. You feel involved. I agree with that. I think that there are so many different developers for black and white that you really can, in the darkroom, change everything about your photograph just by the type of developer you choose, the development process that you go through, and then even in the enlarging and printing section, you can really change everything about the image, and it's really involved, which is a very good point. I think that is a lot of what draws me to black and white as well. MaddieMason.jpg said, black and white has forced me to focus more on moments than aesthetics. That's a great point. I think when you have beautiful sunlight and lots of different subjects and like all these colors and greens and reds and blues, it's very easy to get caught up in is this an aesthetic choice that is like really good, rather than focusing on like what the story is there, what that moment you're trying to capture actually is. And so I agree. I think black and white does help you kind of focus in on those moments rather than really worrying about like how aesthetically pleasing a scene is. A Left Foot Forward said, I've been shooting a lot of black and white lately. I want to shoot more slide, but it's too expensive. True. But I will say that my color work gets better after long bouts of black and white. And that's actually a really good point. I find that when I shoot black and white film and kind of focus on what I'm doing as far as like capturing the light the way I want it to, focusing on the directionality and the fill and the lack of fill and the shadows, I really start to see those things a lot better when I am shooting for color. And it helps my color film shooting tremendously. So I think that's a really good point. I think that if you do shoot black and white film and you kind of focus on those things that matter beyond color, when you do move back to color, you have more tools in the tool bag, so to speak. Ryan Horror Film Show says, black and white. The emphasis of composition and subject is at times more important than color. Having that distinction between color and aesthetics versus your subject and what's really important, there is a sweet spot where your composition and your framing and the focus on your subject is really important, and then also what's happening around your subject. And I think that black and white helps you focus on that more. And that's another good point. Composition and framing, those are very, very important things that while there are like rules, I think there are rules that are meant to be broken, and it is very easy shooting black and white to find the boundaries of those rules and then bend or break them. Because again, you're not focusing on color, you're focusing on basically just light. My boy Luke says, color since Neopan 400 is dead. Neopan 400 was a 400 speed black and white film made by Fujifilm that's been discontinued. A very good film. I also am sad that it's not around anymore, but there are other options. Come on, man. And then last one here, Instant Charlie says, black and white. The aesthetic is great and it forces you to get creative. I do think there is something to say about the aesthetic of shooting with black and white. I think it is a timeless look. I think it does have a really solid place in modern photography and storytelling. And I think that there are a lot of photographers out there that I am super into who are really, really good at telling a story with black and white and making it seem very immediate and making you feel like you're there. And that kind of storytelling is a lot more compelling to me. So I agree. I think that that sort of creativity can be a lot more interesting than leaning on color as a crutch. All this to say, I do not dislike color film. I love shooting color. There are a few color film stocks specifically slide film, that I just really love because of the way they render and represent color and have this really lifelike feel to them. Black and white photography is obviously very deeply ingrained in the history of photography, and I think because of that, people can view it as out of touch or antiquated. I think it really would help if you were to step away from color photography and to spend some time shooting black and white and getting comfortable there. All right, well, it's cold. I'm still sick and I'm out here in the cold like an idiot. I'm gonna go back inside. Thanks to everyone who responded to the question. I really loved reading all of your responses. It was really great seeing a lot of thoughtful responses and realizing that I'm not really alone in feeling that black and white film does have a really important place in photography today. This channel has no sponsors. We are completely supported by our Patreon. If you want to be a part of that, please consider going to the Patreon page in the description and signing up. Okay, I'm gonna go. Thank you so much for watching, and I hope you have a great day.